USA Today cites a source familiar with LeBron's thinking. I always love that. His thinking. He's frustrated, he's concerned with the state of the Cavaliers. So, I guess this is him taking frustration and concern out on that mirror and those spandex. Spandex.
Wow.
It's
good.
Around the
He does look
Horn,
good.
the show of competitive banter. Here's Tony Reali.
The first thing we got to get Colin to do is cut his hair. You know, I mean, listen, I'm not up here to try to be politically correct, but, you know, even if he puts cornrows in it, I don't think he should represent himself, you know, in that way in terms of, you know, just the hairstyle. Just go clean cut.
Michael Vick on FS1. Speak for yourself. A tweet from Colin Kaepernick today defines Stockholm Syndrome. You can decide for yourself if he's accusing Vick of that. Before that Kaepernick tweet, Vick tweeted that he stands by what he said on the show, but that he doesn't feel hair is the reason he's not in the NFL. Jay, where do you come down on this?
First, I wonder why we're even asking Michael Vick to compare his situation to Colin Kaepernick. Michael Vick was accused of a crime and eventually did jail time for said crime. Colin Kaepernick is not facing any criminal charges. He didn't even violate any NFL rules. He exercised his First Amendment rights. So let's dispel the notion that these are two comparable situations, and whether or not the haircut is something that would basically make him suitable for reintegrating into the NFL and society is really a whole separate discussion. That's the problem. This is a separate discussion than what Colin Kaepernick asked us to address, and that is the idea of police brutality and whether or not we're going to be continually tolerant of police officers killing African-American citizens, in particular, any American citizens. So we've gone so far off the rails in this discussion. This is yet another example. Are we going to be comfortable with police killing American citizens? That's what the Colin Kaepernick issue should be.
Pablo Torre, how did you hear this exchange?
You know, I had a similar thought to J.A. at the top in terms of these two situations not being very analogous. But then it sort of dawned on me why it's so natural for us to jump from a conversation around police brutality to one around why people who have been imprisoned should be able to reintegrate themselves better. And the reason is because all of this is about making people feel less uncomfortable with you. That's the crazy part about this, is that this is about reducing the discomfort of a demographic of owners, of very wealthy, overwhelmingly white owners who fundamentally have an issue with not just what Colin is saying, but how he's saying it and the degree to which their lives are complicated by that expression. And there's a term, by the way, for asking someone to compromise their tone and their message and their appearance and their ideology, and that term is, unfortunately for Michael Vick, political correctness. This is what it means to be politically correct, is to silence somebody because they make you uncomfortable in substance, let alone appearance. And that's at the heart of this situation and why we end up talking to Michael Vick about Colin Kaepernick.
Jackie McMullen?
Right. I think Pablo's on to something there. And so the discussion of Colin Kaepernick, why are we talking about him? Because he doesn't have a job in the NFL. And are we saying that he doesn't have a job in the NFL because of the stand he took that Jay so eloquently described and because of maybe his hair and all the other things that Pablo talks about with the owners? I think it's a fair question. You know, people keep saying, well, oh, no, that's not the reason Colin Kaepernick doesn't have a job. It's because he's not really good in the pocket. So my colleague Bill Barnwell, the great Bill Barnwell, I'm just going to share this with you. Pocket passer rating. Players, backup quarterbacks that have a worse pocket passer rating than Kaepernick last year. Chad Henne, Geno Smith, Drew Stanton, Brock Osweiler, Chase Daniel, Matt Barkley, Landry Jones, Matt Castle. So don't tell me that Colin Kaepernick is without a job because he's not a good football player.
Okay, let me ask you this
point
point blank then, Jackie McMullen. Do you believe if he changed the way he looked, because that's how this conversation started,
right,
would he be employed in the NFL today?
Boy, I really hope not. But let's be real here. Should he change his hair? No. Should he change his political stances? No. But does it make the owners that Pablo Torre we're talking about uncomfortable? So uncomfortable that they don't want to touch this player? Sadly, I think the answer is yes.
Let's bring in Mina Kimes.
I do not agree with Michael Vick's comments about Colin Kaepernick's hair, but I'm not outraged them. I think coming from Vick in particular, given what he went through, given what he thought it took for him to rebuild his image, it's not entirely surprising to me that he would feel that way. What I am outraged outraged by is his other comment, which is that Colin Kaepernick's protest had nothing to do with his job status this year. That's simply ridiculous. Everyone I've talked to inside and around the NFL this summer admits that. Even people who believe that Colin Kaepernick is not particularly great at football admit that. It's time for everyone to agree and admit it as well, including Michael Vick.
Jay, can I bring you back in here to speak maybe even historically about hair and the discussion that goes on with black athletes, black citizens for as long as this discussion's been had?
Well, it's interesting because, say a Ben Wallace grows out his afro and people love it and they have promotional giveaway afros and everybody thinks it's fun and cute, and they want to pat your afro. But Colin Kaepernick does it as an expression of his black identity, and all of a sudden it's threatening and it's something that needs to go if he wants to get a job in the NFL again. So, yeah, this hair conversation could take up the entire show if we wanted to get into it, but that's just a quick observation that I had.
Pablo, you want it back in?
Yeah, and as for the hair being a solution to getting him back into the league, I don't think, actually, it would work. I don't think that's enough, but what it does is gesture very publicly that there is some sense of reform and atonement. We know that Colin Kaepernick's not going to back down from his philosophy, so the question is, well, what kind of territory can we seize back from him? And in this case, it turns out to be maybe his appearance, which shows some semblance of regret.
And Jackie McMullen.
And you know what? We've been hearing about the hair for decades now. I remember Ahmad Rashad doing an interview about being in college and wanting to play intercollegiate sports, and the coach said to him, yeah, well, you got to cut your hair. And he said, well, I'm not going to cut your hair. And he said, then you're not going to be on my team. So this is an age-old problem. It really is.
And it's a straw man, right? Or would be willing to call it that? It's an absolute straw man. Yeah. Jay, would you call it a straw man just to even bring it up? Yeah.
This whole thing's a straw man. Again, the media has failed so much on this story in failing to address the issue that Colin Kaepernick was willing to risk his career over. Once again, police brutality.
Thanks for your thoughts. We'll move on. LeBron James in that USA Today report that he is frustrated and concerned with what's going on with the Cavs offseason. That's coming from a source that is close to LeBron's thinking, whatever that means. I love how you guys write that in your articles. Jackie, should the Cavaliers care about LeBron's frustrations and concerns right now in July?
Oh, yes, they should care deeply. Listen, the worst-kept secret in the NBA right now is that LeBron can opt out after next year, and we all think he's going. This is not like the last time when we were wondering if he was really going to go back to Cleveland. Everybody's convinced he's out of there if things don't get better in a hurry. And what do? You let the GM go that LeBron grew to respect and like very much, and in the middle of negotiating in the most important part of the season. Are you kidding me? And then I think when you look at Jamal Crawford, someone that Cleveland went after, he chooses the Minnesota Timberwolves because you're only going to give him the minimum instead of the mid-level exception that you had available to you. Those kind of things don't sit well with the greatest player in the game who has the right to move on, and I think probably will.
Pablo Torre?
I think LeBron James, if it proceeds at this rate, is also gone. And I'm not alone. Jackie's absolutely right about that. But something I learned from being around LeBron and his business team is that they see themselves not as employees, but partners. This is the term they keep on using. We want partners. We don't want to be employees. And obviously, if you're Dan Gilbert, a guy who is a titan in his realm of business, and that's a whole separate discussion as to what his business actually is, but in terms of him being a powerful billionaire who wants to be the boss very clearly and chafes when someone like LeBron expresses a counter notion that, no, actually LeBron James is the most powerful person in the Cavaliers organization. No, wait, actually LeBron James is the most powerful person in Cleveland. No, wait, LeBron James is the most powerful person in sports. All of that for an owner is uncomfortable too. And if you're Dan Gilbert, you say, I spent all this money. Why can't this be enough? And if you're LeBron, you're saying that's not enough in today's game.
Exactly. Jay, can you answer any of Pablo's questions right there?
Well, the one thing Dan Gilbert has done is spent the money, but it's not enough to just spend money. You have to spend money wisely, and you have to make good decisions, and that is the concern for LeBron James. It's interesting. I had a conversation during ESPY Week with a member of his circle, if you want to use that phrase, and it was basically parallel to what the USA Today article was saying, that LeBron is concerned that the next 5 years of his career will basically be like his first tenure in Cleveland, that he was not surrounded with the right pieces to make a adequate run at a championship. And he sees it happening all over again. And now he also hears the clock ticking. And yes, the departure is a very real possibility. The L.A. Lakers are a very real possibility.
Mina Kimes.
Unlike my fellow panelists, I have not hung out with LeBron or people in his circle, but I know that he's frustrated because anyone with a set of ears and eyes knows he's frustrated and understands why. Look, LeBron is extraordinarily savvy. He knows they were pressed for cap space this summer, and it would have been difficult to swing for a free agent or a trade for George or Butler. But he also knows that with a savvy GM, like look at what Daryl Morey did in Houston to get Chris Paul, they could have tried to pull something off. They don't just not have a savvy GM, they don't have any GM. So of course he's angry. It's completely understandable.
Jackie Mack back in. It's good.
You know, it's funny. We always talk about LeBron's legacy, and Pablo has hit on something that is so true. He will go down as the empowered athlete. And by that, I mean he is controlling where he goes. He is controlling his entire career. Name a player before him that did that. Not even Michael Jordan did that. Michael Jordan controlled the whole Nike thing. He introduced all that. But no one has ever taken the NBA by the throat the way LeBron James has and said, this is my league, and I'm going to use it the way it fits me.
Great point, Jackie Mack. And since you said it was Pablo's, it's a great point, Pablo Torre. A last word, Torre.
Yeah, and I was going to point out that when they were interviewing our colleague, Chauncey Billups, to be president of this team, they lowballed him. I mean, ESPN was paying him or is going to pay him about as much, if not more, than the Cavs will to run their organization. And if you're LeBron James, you're smart enough to know that that gesture is not accidental. That's telling everybody something.
And Jay Adonde.
This goes back to the failed attempt to get Jimmy Butler, which some people say that Dan Gilbert quashed. And if that had succeeded, then it would have empowered David Griffin. He would have had the stage. So Dan Gilbert won that little power struggle, but guess what? He might have lost the overall battle, the war with LeBron James.
Well, let's see if Adonde won the power struggle or lost the war. I'm not a fan of familiar with someone's thinking. Adonde gave us, I talked to someone in LeBron's circle. Thumbs up or thumbs down, Mina, Pablo, Jackie. Should we allow it?
Someone
I'm allowing
that
it.
guilty of
I'm allowing it. I'm allowing it.
All right, fine. We'll
The
allow it.
lounge is open. The lounge is open.
We'll take a break.
Yeah, we're allowing that. We're allowing that.
Buy or sell.
Our goal was to sign Kurt to a long-term contract. We made Kurt an offer that included the highest fully guaranteed amount upon signing for a quarterback in NFL history. But despite our repeated attempts, we have not received any offer from Kurt's agent this year.
Speaking of repeated attempts, the team said if it sounded like Bruce Allen called Kurt, it's because of his accent. On radio today, Cousins says it's been Kurt or Kirk his whole life, so he doesn't matter. Mina, buy or sell Washington's stance here and Allen's press conference yesterday?
Sell. I sell. I do not begrudge them for not signing Kirk Cousins to a long-term deal, but this statement is an absolute clown show. They are essentially complaining because he's walking away from $52 million. Kirk Cousins is already making $24 million this year, which means essentially they're offering him $30 million guaranteed over 4 years. That is a fraction of what he will make if he waits a year to hit the market and becomes the first above-average quarterback to enter free agency in years. It is absolutely humiliating that they would issue this kind of press release, which, by the way, never happens, and it shed some light, I think, on why Kirk Cousins is walking away from this franchise.
Tell us how you really feel. Jay Adonde, how about you?
Have to sell yesterday's news release and comments. Always be skeptical when the team starts talking numbers. What do we usually see in a team news release when there is a contract deal reached? Terms of the deal were not disclosed per team policy, right? But they're willing to violate team policy when it suits them, as it did in this case. So the fact that they're willing to share the numbers indicates that the numbers were a little bit screwy.
Pablo Torre?
First off, he was obviously saying Kurt. He said Kurt.
Agree.
That is
What
just
accent
insane.
would that have?
That's insane. Yeah. Like, we should talk about that. That's crazy. It doesn't make any sense, but it kind of fits with the larger picture here, which is that the internal dysfunctionality of an organization prevents it from ever actually competing at large with other organizations. There's a little bit of Phil Jackson with the Knicks here, a little bit of, hey, let's undermine our own assets because we're worried about friction with them, as opposed to trying to grow and get better and perhaps better use the assets that we have. And that is always plagued this team.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to me because I think a lot of football people would say they have the right to question aloud whether Cousins deserves a boatload of money. I think a lot of people would understand that. But to do it this way, to undermine that same quarterback, to leave your general manager hanging in the wind and to make suggestions about his alcohol use, all of that to me is just despicable. And it, someone like me might have had a little bit of sympathy for Washington's position had they not done this. How can you have any sympathy for it?
So 4 sellers on Washington. The consecutive show streak of 4 sellers on a Washington topic is like an 18 straight. We'll move on. There's a situation in Pittsburgh between the Steelers and Le'Veon Bell. And if you're a Steelers fan, this is not a headline you want to read. Without deal, prepare for 16-game standoff. Bell hasn't signed his franchise tag. He's not sure he'll show up at camp. Quote, I'm not in a rush to sign for something I'm not valued at if I feel I'm worth more than what they're offering me. And tweet, guess I got to get better. And tweet. Jay, does this have the makings of a holdout to you?
It does, and because that's really the only tool at players' discretion, right? And I'm also buying the notion that running back is the most undervalued position. It's disposable. So even if you're the best running back, as he implied, and he certainly has a good case for it, it doesn't matter. They don't treat that. It's also interesting that he's trying to position himself as a receiver as well, noting that he was second on the team in receptions.
I do praise him for standing up for his occupation, as J.A. noted, especially in a sport where the franchise tag is dependent on actual salaries of the people in that occupation. But I will point out that he can only do this because he is really, really good. And it does seem to be the case that he is probably at the very least going to miss training camp and some of the preseason, because if you're a running back who's very disposable, you don't want to expose yourself to injuries. So there is some strategy there on that level, too.
Jackie Mack?
That's exactly what I would do if I was Bell. I would sit out the preseason and the exhibition, because why would I put myself out there to get hurt and devalue myself going forward? I like also that he's representing running backs, but unfortunately for him, it doesn't matter because everybody's already decided that running backs are a dime a dozen. Whether that's fair or not, that's just the landscape.
It's incredible, right? I mean, the number we're talking about here is half of what Kirk Cousins, whichever one you want to say, half of what he's getting. And do we think Bell is a better player than Cousins? Kimes, you?
Yeah.
I think he is. I think he is also the greatest offensive weapon on that team, not just as a running back, also catching passes over the last 4 years.
More than Antonio Brown. Interesting. Okay.
Over the last 4 years, Tony, Le'Veon Bell has averaged more yards per scrimmage per game over any running back in NFL history. He is absolutely amazing. I don't think he sits out, but I do think if he has even a slight injury, he will not play because he is not going to put his body on the line for a team that is not going to pay him.
He's missed games before with injury and with suspension. We'll move on. Buy or sell 3. Surprise, Houston Rockets are for sale. Pablo, buy or sell the timing here as the Rockets had this incredible offseason and are staring down the Warriors.
I buy that the timing is not coincidental. It's like if you have an apartment that you're getting ready to sell, you rip up the tiles from the bathroom. You sign a point guard who's a superstar. You redo the shower curtains. You sign James Harden till 20.
You redo the shower curtain? Like that's going to be holding you back? This is from a man, by the way, put the camera on me, who didn't have a toilet seat in his apartment in New York City for the first 3 years that he had it. Nod your head in agreement, Pablo. Nod your head in agreement. McMullen, please.
Oh, my gosh, Pablo, you've got me flummoxed. I was really shocked by this, Tony. We had no indication that Les Alexander was interested in selling. He's one of the most hands-on owners, one of the longest tenured owners, and it seems to me that Houston's poised to do something that he's been waiting to do. He has those trophies in his office from the Akeem years, so I don't understand exactly what this is about, and I wonder if there's more to it that we might learn about later on.
Mina Kimes?
I'm not too concerned about it. Having just signed Harden and Morey to long-term deals, having Paul in place, having the talent around him, they've sort of child-proofed this team in a way for a new owner. And I mean, we've seen over this last offseason how much damage an owner can do to a team. Cleveland. But I think that they're fine for the long term as long as they don't sell to like Donald Sterling or something.
It's the definition of selling high. All the pieces are in place in Houston. The league's in great financial shape with the TV pointing in. If I'm the other owners, though, I'm wondering if he knows something that we don't, and that this is the peak, and maybe they should be thinking about getting out, too.
Jackie McMullen, I think you do. Pablo Torre, Papa Squat. Kimes, Adonde. No doubt next.
Okay, Kevin, for the grand prize of $1 million. What color is the White House?
I know this.
5 seconds.
Oh, switching to Geico could save you a bunch of money on car insurance?
Okay. Judges? That's true, Kevin. They'll allow it. Congratulations. You're a winner.
Woo!
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
Mina Kimes, J.A. Adonde, and Showdown. Check this out. The Houston Astros held a funeral in the outfield yesterday and laid Carlos Beltran's glove to rest. He's their DH, won't be needing it. Mina, how do you think this will affect the Astros moving forward?
I think it's going to be great. What's amazing is that is Brian McCann leading the procession. Brian McCann, the sheriff of the MLB's Fun Police. That's how much Houston has changed him. He's wearing a costume and having a good time. What greater testament to this team.
Tombstones actually have a revered place in the history of the Astros. Remember that time the Houston Chronicle had tombstones and basically said their season was over, and then they were far from done, and they used that as motivation. So maybe this will be more motivation for them. Tombstones with the Astros.
Wow. That was a lot of information Adonde brought to the table there on Tombstones in the Houston Chronicle. You know what? I'll give you a point for that. We'll move on. Showdown 2. Saw this on Deadspin. Nashville Predators fan who won tickets to Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Final, but just found out this week because he didn't go on Twitter to check in the last month. He missed the game. Preds lost the game and the series. So how should he feel about this, Jay?
You should feel like, how many times are you going to find something worthwhile in your mentions? Like, don't read the comments, don't check your mentions. At least that's my approach to things. So I don't blame the guy at all.
Tony. 1, he missed a loss. 2, he has an amazing beard. And 3, he's been off of Twitter for a month. We should all live like this man.
This is good advice from both Adonde and Kimes. Look at the score. Jay's taking the FaceTime.
You know, Nike is taking over the NBA uniform contract, and they should bring some productive, creative, innovative things. One thing I don't like, though, is the way they're renaming things. We no longer have home and away jerseys. We've got association jerseys and icon jerseys. We're supposed to say, oh, they're wearing their association whites tonight at home, when they could be wearing them on the road as well. I don't get it at all. One thing I do like, though, as I saw the leak of colorways of the Bucks jerseys, the Moncrief era throwbacks, the City Moncrief era, kind of liking those. Bring those back.
Good, folks. 23 and a half hour break. See you tomorrow.